Welcome to Shadow of History, mysterious, dark, and untold stories from world history. Today, we're diving into one of the most bizarre and unusual military conflicts in history, the Emu War. This might sound like a strange joke, but it was a real event that took place in Australia in 1932. In this peculiar and often overlooked chapter of history, the Australian military found itself battling one of the country's most iconic and stubborn creatures, the emu. Let's explore the story behind the Emu War and why this strange battle between men and birds has become a part of Australian folklore. In 1932, Australia was struggling with a number of agricultural and economic problems. The country's Great Depression was hitting farmers especially hard, as they dealt with low crop prices, droughts, and an increasing number of pests. One particular pest, the emu, was becoming a serious problem for farmers in Western Australia. These large, flightless birds, which can grow up to 6 feet tall, had been wreaking havoc on wheat crops. By the end of 1931, emu populations in the region had exploded, and they were increasingly seen as a threat to the agricultural industry. Emus are native to Australia, and while they're not known for being particularly aggressive, their size, speed, and tendency to travel in large groups made them a formidable opponent for farmers. The birds would trample over crops, eat wheat, and generally destroy farmland, making it incredibly difficult for farmers to recover. By early 1932, emus had caused significant damage to crops in the wheat-growing regions of Western Australia, particularly in areas like the town of Campione, where emus were reported to be eating and destroying wheat plants in record numbers. The Australian government, led by Prime Minister James Scullin, was under pressure to find a solution to the problem. In November 1932, the government decided to send in the military to deal with the emu menace. The decision was driven by frustration, as farmers had been attempting to combat the birds on their own, but had been largely unsuccessful. It was thought that the military would have the tools, resources, and manpower to put an end to the emu invasion. Thus, the Emu War was born. The Australian government enlisted soldiers from the 7th Light Horse Regiment, commanded by Major G.P.W. Meredith, and armed them with machine guns. The plan was simple. The soldiers would go into the wheat-growing areas of Western Australia, set up positions, and use their machine guns to eliminate the emu threat. The military operation was seen as a practical response to a growing problem, but what followed was nothing short of farcical. The first major confrontation took place on November 2, 1932. The soldiers set up near the town of Campione, where the emus were known to be causing the most damage. When the soldiers arrived, they were shocked to see the sheer number of emus, thousands of them roaming the fields. The emus, however, weren't particularly intimidated by the presence of the soldiers. They scattered in different directions, making it difficult for the soldiers to target them. Despite having machine guns at their disposal, the soldiers found that the emus were surprisingly fast, agile, and elusive. In the first encounter, the soldiers managed to fire on the emus, but the birds quickly ran for cover. Only a few emus were killed, and the soldiers were frustrated by their inability to hit the fast-moving targets. The emus' ability to spread out across a wide area, combined with their speed, made them very difficult to eliminate. Even when the soldiers managed to fire at a group of emus, the birds would scatter in all directions, leaving only a few casualties. The failure to make any significant progress led to the soldiers retreating and regrouping. Over the next several weeks, the military launched additional attacks on the emus, but the results were hardly any better. The soldiers found that they were only able to kill a small number of the birds, while the rest of the flock simply fled into the countryside. Worse still, the machine guns often jammed or malfunctioned, further hampering the soldiers' efforts. By late November, the soldiers had grown disheartened. Despite having military-grade weaponry, they were unable to contain the emu population. The birds proved to be surprisingly resilient and resourceful, and they began to adapt to the soldiers' presence. In fact, the emus would often avoid direct confrontation by running into the dense bush or by scattering in multiple directions, making it nearly impossible to round them up or target them effectively. One of the most humorous moments of the Emu War came when a soldier reported that the birds seemed to be smarter than they had anticipated. According to some reports, the emus appeared to recognize the soldiers' tactics and would often move in such a way that the soldiers could not effectively aim their weapons. It was as though the emus were evading capture and mocking the military's efforts. The operation quickly became a laughingstock both in Australia and internationally. The government, initially confident that the military would quickly deal with the emu problem, found itself on the receiving end of ridicule. The idea of an organized military campaign against birds, and failing at that, was seen as absurd. By December 1932, the government, faced with mounting criticism, decided to withdraw the military and end the operation. The Emu War was declared a failure, and the soldiers returned to their bases, having made little impact on the emu population. While the Emu War ended in defeat for the military, the emu problem didn't disappear. Farmers in Western Australia continued to struggle with the birds, and it wasn't until later that more effective measures were introduced. In the years following the war, the government would implement a more successful emu control program, which involved building exclusion barriers and using other forms of deterrence, such as poisoning rather than military action. The legacy of the Emu War endures to this day, primarily as a humorous chapter in Australia's history. The tale of men in uniform facing off against large, flightless birds has become a symbol of the absurdity of military overreach and the unintended consequences of poorly thought-out plans. The Emu War remains a source of pride for some Australians, as it has become part of the country's unique national folklore. Despite the lightheartedness that surrounds the Emu War today, it serves as a reminder of the challenges that arise when humans attempt to control nature. It highlights the sometimes comical but also sobering reality that even the most advanced military technology cannot always solve problems in nature. In the case of the emus, it was their natural ability to evade capture and their resilience that won the day, while the soldiers, despite their best efforts, were outsmarted by birds. Thank you for joining us as we uncovered the strange and humorous tale of the Emu War. If you found this story as intriguing as we did, make sure to subscribe to Shadow of History for more mysterious, dark, and untold stories from the past. Don't forget to like, share, and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. Until next time, stay curious and continue uncovering the untold stories that have shaped our world.